Look, we need to talk about British food. For decades, the rest of the world has been absolutely roasting the United Kingdom for its culinary traditions. Jellied eels floating in murky liquid. Beans on toast served as an actual meal. Marmite, that dark, sticky, deeply divisive spread that smells like a science experiment gone wrong. Spotted dick. Mushy peas. And let us not forget the humble black pudding, which is essentially congealed blood shaped into a sausage. The jokes write themselves, honestly, but here is the thing that most people completely miss. Hidden beneath all of those bizarre dishes and questionable food choices is an absolutely treasure trove of genuinely brilliant cooking wisdom that has been quietly passed down through British kitchens for generations. The British are not bad cooks, they are just misunderstood ones. And today, we are completely blowing up that stereotype because I have gathered 31 of the most clever, practical, and genuinely mind-blowing cooking tricks that British people actually use in their everyday kitchens. Some of these will change how you cook forever. Let us count them down. Number 31. The cold butter grating trick for perfect scones and pastry. British people make scones constantly, and the secret that separates a flaky, layered scone from a dense hockey puck is this. Freeze your butter completely solid, then use a box grater to grate it directly into your flour mixture. Frozen butter grates into tiny shards that coat individually in flour before you even start mixing. When those butter pieces hit the oven heat, they release steam rapidly, and that steam is what creates those beautiful, flaky layers. Room temperature butter just smears through your dough and you lose all that layered structure. Stick your butter in the freezer for 20 minutes before you start. Grate it straight from frozen and toss the shards in flour immediately so they stay separate. Number 30. Using Yorkshire tea to brine your chicken. This sounds absolutely mad, but it works magnificently. British people have been cooking with strong tea for centuries, and a Yorkshire tea brine transforms an ordinary chicken into something remarkable. Brew 4 strong tea bags in a liter of hot water, add 2 tablespoons of salt and a tablespoon of sugar. Let it cool completely, then submerge your chicken in it for at least 4 hours or overnight in the refrigerator. The tannins in black tea help break down muscle proteins in the meat, which tenderizes it dramatically. The salt draws moisture in through osmosis, keeping the chicken juicy during cooking. The result is deeper, more complex flavor without any obvious tea taste in the finished bird. Number 29. The vinegar trick for perfect poached eggs. Every cafe in Britain serves poached eggs, and the professionals all use this technique. Add a generous splash of white wine vinegar to your simmering water before you drop the egg in. Vinegar lowers the pH of the water, and this causes the egg white proteins to coagulate faster and more tightly around the yolk. Without vinegar, those wispy white strands go flying off in every direction, and you end up with a sad, ragged egg. With vinegar, the white wraps around the yolk cleanly and quickly. Swirl the water into a gentle vortex. Crack your egg into a small cup first for control, then lower the cup to the water surface and slide the egg in gently at the center of that vortex. Number 28. Resting meat under a tent of foil with a damp paper towel. British Sunday roasts are legendary, and the professional trick used by every good British cook involves this resting method. After pulling your roast from the oven, lay a single sheet of damp paper towel over the meat, then loosely tent foil over the top. The damp paper creates a humid microclimate under the foil. This prevents the crust from going soggy, while also stopping the surface from drying out and going leathery during the resting period. Plain foil creates condensation that drips back and destroys your crust. The damp towel regulates that moisture perfectly. Rest your joint for at least 20 minutes this way. Number 27. The British trick of salting aubergine with a weighted plate. British recipes that include aubergine, what Americans call eggplant, almost always call for salting it first. But the method matters enormously. Slice your aubergine, salt generously on both sides, then place it in a colander with a heavy plate pressed down on top for 30 minutes. The salt draws out the bitter liquid through osmosis, and the weight accelerates this process significantly. The aubergine also collapses slightly, which means it absorbs far less oil when you fry it because the cell structure has already been partially broken down. You end up with aubergine that is richer in flavor, less bitter, and not a greasy sponge. Number 26. Using Marmite to boost gravies and stews. Marmite is a British institution, and British cooks use it as a secret weapon in savory cooking constantly. Add just half a teaspoon of Marmite to your gravy, stew, or braising liquid. Marmite is intensely packed with glutamates, which are the compounds responsible for umami, that deep savory quality that makes food taste more complex and satisfying. You cannot taste the Marmite itself at these small quantities, but the depth it adds to a gravy is extraordinary. It also darkens the color beautifully. Americans can find Marmite in specialty stores or online easily, and it will transform your gravies immediately. Number 25. The custard trick of tempering with warm milk. British custard made from scratch is one of the great pleasures of life, and the trick that prevents scrambled egg disaster is tempering. Whisk your egg yolks and sugar together until pale. Heat your milk until it is steaming, but not boiling. Now pour just a small ladleful of that hot milk into your egg mixture while whisking constantly. This gradually raises the temperature of the eggs without cooking them. Then pour the warmed egg mixture back into the pan with the remaining milk. This gradual temperature introduction prevents the proteins from seizing and curdling. Low heat and constant stirring from this point forward gives you silky, perfect custard every time. Number 24. The British trick of adding a bay leaf to boiling potatoes. British cooks almost always add a dried bay leaf to the pot when boiling potatoes. The bay leaf infuses a subtle herbal, slightly floral aroma into the potato as it cooks. Potatoes are porous and absorbent, so they pick up surrounding flavors during cooking. The result is a boiled potato that has more complexity and fragrance than one cooked in plain water. This works with pasta water too. The bay leaf releases essential oils during boiling that penetrate the food. 1 leaf per large pot is all you need, and you remove it before serving. Number 23. Making your own self-raising flour with baking powder and cream of tartar. British recipes constantly call for self-raising flour, which Americans often cannot find easily. British bakers know that you make it yourself by adding 2 teaspoons of baking powder and half a teaspoon of cream of tartar to every cup of plain flour. The cream of tartar is the detail most people miss. It reacts with the baking powder differently than baking powder alone, providing a more controlled and sustained rise rather than one sharp burst of leavening. This is why British sponge cakes rise so evenly and have such a consistent crumb structure. Number 22. The trick of leaving pastry to rest in cold dough form. British bakers always rest their short crust pastry in the refrigerator for at least 30 minutes before rolling. The gluten strands that develop during mixing need time to relax. If you roll pastry immediately, the gluten is still tense and elastic, so it shrinks back during blind baking and you lose your shape. After 30 minutes of cold rest, the gluten has relaxed completely, the butter has firmed up again, and you can roll evenly. The cold fat also stays in separate layers rather than melting into the dough, which is what gives you that crumbly, short texture. Number 21. The British method of adding cold water to boiling jam. When making jam, which British people make in enormous quantities, cloudiness in the finished preserve is the enemy. The trick is to drop a small square of cold butter into the bubbling jam just before jarring. The butter breaks the surface tension of the liquid, which causes the foam and any cloudiness-causing proteins to sink back into the jam rather than being suspended at the top. You get a clearer, more jewel-like jam without any tedious skimming. 1 small knob of cold butter is all it takes. Number 20. Using stale bread for a perfect bread sauce. British people never waste stale bread, and bread sauce is the perfect example of this ingenuity. Bread sauce is served with roast chicken across Britain, and it relies on stale bread specifically because day-old or 2-day-old bread has lost moisture and its starch has crystallized. This means it absorbs the infused milk mixture more evenly and thickens without becoming gluey or heavy. Fresh bread contains too much moisture and the sauce becomes dense and pasty. Simmer whole cloves, bay leaves, and a halved onion in milk for 20 minutes. Strain it, then stir in your stale breadcrumbs and let them absorb fully before seasoning. Number 19. The parboiling trick for the crispiest roast potatoes. British roast potatoes are a national obsession, and the technique that makes them shatteringly crispy on the outside while fluffy inside involves this specific step. Parboil your peeled and chopped potatoes in heavily salted water until the outside is just starting to soften, about 8 to 10 minutes. Drain them, put the lid back on the pan, and shake the pan vigorously. This roughens the exterior of the potato pieces, creating a cracked, uneven surface. That surface area maximizes crisping in the hot fat. Drain into a colander. Allow steam to escape for 2 full minutes, then toss into screaming hot fat in your oven pan. Number 18. Using goose fat or lard instead of oil for roasting. British cooks roast in animal fat, not vegetable oil, and there is a scientific reason this works so much better. Animal fats like goose fat and lard have higher smoke points in their refined forms, and they penetrate food differently than plant oils. More importantly, they stay liquid at high oven temperatures without breaking down and turning acrid. They also coat food more evenly, basting as the meat or vegetables cook. A tablespoon of goose fat in your roasting pan, heated until it shimmers before adding your parboiled potatoes, delivers a crunch and flavor that vegetable oil simply cannot replicate. Number 17. The trick of cooking sausages in cold water first. British sausages, particularly Cumberland and Lincolnshire varieties, benefit enormously from this counterintuitive technique. Place your sausages in a cold pan, add just enough water to reach halfway up the sides, and heat over medium flame. As the water heats, it gradually cooks the sausage from the inside out while also leaching out excess fat. Once the water evaporates, the sausages then fry in their own released fat, giving you even browning without split skins or raw centers. Starting in cold rather than hot fat prevents the outside from sealing before the inside cooks through. Number 16. Using the pasta water trick in reverse for mushy peas. Mushy peas are a British staple, particularly up north, and the trick for making them thick and flavorful rather than watery involves reserving the cooking liquid. Cook your marrow-fat peas in water with a pinch of bicarbonate of soda, which softens them faster. Once tender, do not drain completely. Reserve the starchy, intensely flavored cooking water, mash the peas, then add just enough reserved liquid to reach your preferred consistency. This starchy water binds the mash together rather than thinning it out, and the flavor stays concentrated rather than going down the drain. Number 15. The British trick of cooling cakes completely before icing. British baking culture has an absolute rule about this, and the chemistry explains why. Buttercream and most icings are emulsions of fat and sugar. When you apply icing to a warm cake, the heat melts the fat component, the emulsion breaks, and the icing slides off or becomes greasy and sunken. A completely cooled cake maintains the temperature stability that keeps the icing in its emulsified, spreadable state. Cool your sponge on a wire rack for at least an hour, and if you have time, refrigerate the layers briefly before icing for maximum stability. Number 14. Adding a splash of beer to your batter for fish and chips. British fish and chip shops use beer batter because the carbonation does something that water cannot. The carbon dioxide bubbles in beer create tiny air pockets throughout the batter as it fries. These bubbles expand in the hot oil, and then the batter sets around them, trapping air and creating a light, crispy texture rather than a dense, doughy coating. The alcohol also evaporates more quickly than water, which speeds up the crisping process. Use a light ale or lager, mix it cold into your flour until just combined with lumps still visible, and fry immediately. Number 13. The British trick of using a cold oven for starting meringue. French meringue gets baked high and fast, but British pavlova tradition uses a different approach entirely. Heat your oven to the required temperature. Put your piped meringue inside, then immediately turn the oven down low. Some British cooks even turn it off completely after the initial heat. This slow, low-temperature drying process, rather than baking process, removes moisture from the meringue gradually without browning the outside before the inside sets. The result is that crisp outer shell with a marshmallow soft interior that defines a perfect pavlova. Number 12. Using milk instead of water for scrambled eggs. British cafe scrambled eggs are creamy and soft, and the technique involves using whole milk instead of water and keeping the heat low throughout. Water turns to steam quickly and makes eggs fluffy but dry. Milk proteins and fat interact with the egg proteins during slow cooking, creating a creamier, more custardy texture. Low heat is essential because egg proteins set at relatively low temperatures. Pull the pan off the heat while the eggs still look slightly underdone because residual heat continues cooking them for another 30 seconds. Number 11. The trick of salting pasta water like the sea. British professional cooks, despite the stereotype, know that pasta water should be aggressively salted. The ratio is 1 tablespoon of salt per 4 liters of water. Salt raises the boiling point very slightly, but more importantly, it seasons the pasta from the inside as it cooks by osmosis. Undersalted pasta water produces pasta that tastes flat no matter how good your sauce is. Season the water first, cook your pasta properly, and the foundation of every pasta dish you make improves dramatically and permanently. Number 10. Using sandwich bags to pipe icing without a piping bag. This is pure British home baker ingenuity that the baking world needs to embrace. Fill a clean Ziploc or sandwich bag with your buttercream. Twist the top to force icing to one corner. Then snip a tiny piece from that corner. You now have a functional piping bag for a fraction of the cost. British home bakers have done this for generations. The angle of your cut determines the thickness of the line. Refrigerate the filled bag for 5 minutes before piping if your kitchen is warm, so the icing stays firm during application. Number 9. The trick of using a wooden spoon across a boiling pot. British cooks place a wooden spoon across the top of a boiling pot of pasta or potatoes to prevent boilover. The wooden handle disrupts the surface tension of the foam that forms at the top of boiling starchy water. When bubbles hit the dry wood, they pop rather than accumulating into an overflow cascade. The wood is also a poor heat conductor, so it does not contribute heat to the foam. This simple trick saves your hob from starchy mess repeatedly. Number 8. Adding mustard powder to cheese sauce for sharper flavor. British cheese sauce, used in cauliflower cheese and countless other dishes, almost always includes dry mustard powder. The mustard does not make the sauce taste of mustard at small quantities. Instead, it chemically enhances the sharpness and depth of the cheese flavor by activating flavor compounds in the cheese itself. Add half a teaspoon of dry English mustard powder per cup of finished sauce. English mustard powder has a heat and pungency that yellow American mustard lacks, and that pungency is what does the work here. This transforms an ordinary cheese sauce into something remarkably complex. Number 7. Resting scrambled eggs off the heat before serving. Following on from our scrambled egg tip, this British technique adds one more layer of perfection. Once you pull your scrambled eggs off the heat, let them sit in the pan undisturbed for 45 seconds before plating. The residual heat in the pan finishes the cooking gently and evenly without the risk of the direct flame overcooking the eggs. Then add your butter, season, and plate immediately. This resting period gives you consistently perfect, just-set eggs every single time without the rubber texture of overcooked scrambled eggs. Number 6. The British trick of using cold milk in mashed potato. British mashed potato made correctly is smooth, creamy, and never gluey. The trick that most people get wrong is adding hot milk or cream. When you add hot liquid to hot mashed potato, the heat activates the starch more intensely and you get a gluey, gummy paste. Cold milk goes into your hot mashed potato in a thin stream while you beat it, and the temperature difference creates a controlled starch interaction that results in smooth, fluffy, perfectly textured mash. Beat with a wooden spoon or hand masher rather than an electric mixer to avoid overworking the starch. Number 5. Scoring the skin on pork belly for perfect crackling. British pork crackling is a thing of beauty when done right, and the scoring technique is everything. Use a very sharp knife or a Stanley blade to score the skin in parallel lines about 1 centimeter apart, cutting through the skin but not into the meat beneath. This scoring allows fat to render out from the layer beneath the skin during cooking, and it also creates more surface area for the heat to crisp. After scoring, rub salt generously into every score line, then leave the pork uncovered in the refrigerator overnight. The salt draws surface moisture away, and dry skin is crispy skin. Number 4. Using the residual heat of turned-off oven for meringue drying. This British patience trick is used for pavlovas and individual meringues alike. Once your meringues have been in the oven at the proper temperature for the required time, turn the oven off completely, but leave the meringues inside with the door closed for at least 2 hours, preferably overnight. The residual heat in the oven elements and the oven walls continues drying the meringue slowly and evenly without any cracking or browning. This extended drying process is what gives British meringues that perfect, dry, crisp shell all the way through without any sticky center. Number 3. The trick of adding vinegar to pastry water. British short crust pastry sometimes includes this secret ingredient that changes everything. Add 1 teaspoon of white wine vinegar to your cold water before you incorporate it into the flour and butter mixture. The acid in the vinegar inhibits gluten development in the flour. Less gluten formation means a more tender, less tough pastry that is easier to roll and does not shrink as dramatically during baking. This acid trick is why British pie pastry has that delicate, crumbly quality that seems impossible to replicate. A single teaspoon makes an enormous difference, and you cannot taste it in the finished pastry. Number 2. Using the back of a spoon to test custard consistency. British custard cooked on the stove can go from perfect to scrambled in 30 seconds, so British cooks use this precise test. Dip a wooden spoon into your custard and draw a clean line through the coating on the back of the spoon with your finger. If that line holds its shape cleanly without the custard running back across it, your custard has reached exactly the right consistency. This is called coating the spoon, and it is a more reliable test than any temperature measurement because you are judging the actual physical texture of the custard rather than a number that varies by altitude and pan type. Number 1. And this is the one that will genuinely change how you cook forever. The British trick of using a double boiler for every delicate sauce. British kitchens treat double boilers, called bain-maries, as essential equipment rather than occasional tools. The principle is simple, but the impact is enormous. Place your sauce, custard, chocolate, or egg mixture in a heat-proof bowl over a pan of barely simmering water without letting the bowl touch the water. The steam creates indirect, gentle heat that never exceeds 100 degrees Celsius, which is the temperature at which water turns to steam. Egg proteins curdle well above this temperature when exposed to direct heat, but in a double boiler, the gentle surrounding warmth cooks everything slowly and evenly. This is how British cooks make faultless hollandaise, perfect chocolate ganache, and silky lemon curd without a single failure. Invest in understanding this technique, and you will never ruin a delicate sauce again. Use these tricks, and your cooking will be transformed. Now, let us see you try number 1 this week, and tell me in the comments what happened.